Hello, I'm glad you've joined me for another time with the captain. We're going to continue a thread that I kind of left off last week about humility. What's Humility is an interesting thing because humility and meekness are not signs of weakness. The world, when I talk about the world, the people that don't understand how the Christian principles or how God works or how we should be will see humility and meekness as weakness, and it's not. It's actually a very powerful tool and actually will accomplish greater things from a humble standpoint on a meekness, which is like just a quiet calm. Far more things will get accomplished than the loud screaming and yelling. And like the last couple of weeks, I've talked about Caleb in the promised land and going in there and attacking and whose report are you listening to? Basically, are you going to let fear and panic run everything, or are we going to be humble and meek and strong because that builds strength? And I'm just going to tie it up. We're going to jump into First Peter chapter 5, and the title of this one is Exhortation to Elders. And I think this is really good. In everything we do, in every aspect of life and everywhere we go, there is an order of people, right? There's always going to be a CEO. There's always going to be how I'll put it in our world. There's always going to be a chief, an assistant chief, an operations chief, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, however this all works in your organization. There's always a hierarchy of how things work. What God requires of us, and if you're struggling with your hierarchy, and I'm middle management, I'm sure there's employees that struggle with me and my principles and what I want to see happen. No matter where you go in life, there's always people that struggle with any sort of rules. It's kind of an innate human nature, I guess, of I like all these rules, but I don't like this rule. So this basically is going to kind of tie into if you have a good report, the fear and panic, how do we get out of that, and why humility is so important and powerful. I'm going to start in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5. It says, likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Which, right, if you are new to this business and you're younger, sometimes submitting to those elders of the business, those people that are put in those positions of authority, that's hard. That there's no doubt that some people that, even in my career, in my 26 years so far, there's just some people I struggle submitting myself to because I disagree with their authority. However, as we go through this, God doesn't care if you agree with it or not. Our job as Christians is to submit to it, but that submitting does not mean that we have to endorse their beliefs. That makes sense. A lot of things that we do nowadays becomes like their belief becomes their identity, and that's not true. Our identity in Christ, right? We'll go over that. Our identity in Christ is different than what we do. And I'll explain that here in just a little bit. But basically, if you're a young person, male or female, doesn't matter, we are to submit to our elders. And it says, all of you be subject to one another and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. If you walk into your lieutenant's office, sergeant's office, corporal's office, chief's office, assistant chief, and you're just going to kick their door over and tell them what's going to happen, that conversation is going to go far different in real life than probably what maybe you think you see in your head. I've been there, right? I call it peacocking, right? If someone peacocks all their feathers up and you just get rah, so while you peacock all your feathers up, then there's this conflict that happens, and nothing happens to resolve anything in the middle of conflict, right? Now, some people think that, right? We got to be raw. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to make change. Well, eventually the change that you may have through that process may not be what you really want. And that's not how we operate. Humility is how we operate. And humility does not mean weakness. And I'll explain that in just a minute. But it's pretty clear that God resists the proud. Now, I want you to grasp a concept here. It says God resists the proud. It doesn't say God left the proud. It doesn't say that God abandons the proud. What it says is God resists the proud. And here's the picture I want you to see of that. When God says he resists the proud, basically maybe he still has his hands on you, but he's maybe grabbing you by the chest, or not even grabbing you, maybe just putting your hands out and kind of keeping you at arm's length. Hey, I'm still here. I've got my hands on you. I'm going to resist a little bit because you need to humble ourselves. And one of the biggest things I've always thought and always talked about and always tried to get across in our jobs is if everything is going crazy and everything is falling apart and nothing seems like it's going well, my first question I ask myself is, where am I at in my humility? Have I elevated myself to think I'm the only one that's got all the answers and I'm the best thing that ever is? Because we live in an industry where the alpha personality, the alpha dog personality runs rampant. We need to have that, absolutely. In the middle of the crisis, in the middle of our call, if you're the one that's supposed to be in charge, then you need to have that alpha dog personality and you need to run that and you need to run it well. Remembering that all the people on your team are just as important you are. You just happen to be in front of them this time to get through this situation. God doesn't leave people. He doesn't abandon people. What he does is put his hands up maybe a little bit, and probably puts them on. That's how I visualize it. Putting them on your chest saying, whoa, 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 whoa. I got places you need to go. I got things for you to do. I just need you to be humble a little bit. One of the hardest things to do, especially in our careers, is to be humble. But it says God resists those proud and gives grace to the humble. So once we get to that point where like we get to our knees, or we sit down, or we put our head in our hands, and we just say, okay, God, forgive me. And humble ourselves and become servants again. We're his servant. He's not ours. We don't ring a bell and Jesus shows up to do our bidding. We are here for him to do his bidding. And for us to be in this career to do his bidding, we have to be humble enough and recognize what humility is to be able to say, okay, God, what do you want me to do next? Now, that doesn't mean that we're humble is not like, I'm going to let everybody walk all over me. It's not about being a pushover. Humility is just understanding where your place is what he's talking about here. Submit yourselves to the elders. Just some acts of submission sometimes, and that act of grace and humility goes a long way. I may disagree with that person. I may not like that person. But we all know in that position, we have to at least respect the title and the position. So instead of pushing and pushing and pushing and going against the grain, sometimes that humble position of, okay, I'm going to do this because you've asked me to do this, and we can discuss this later. But just the act of you doing it, or whatever it is, or whatever rule you disagree with, sends a huge message. And it sends a good message. As long as you're not giving the bad report to the rest of the crew, the rest of the people, the rest of the department, don't be that cancer within your organization. We're not called to be those people. What we are called to be is a shining example, a light on a hill, all these things that we've heard over time that says, we've been put here at this moment and this hour and this minute. And it all starts with submitting ourselves to one another. It starts with being having humility, because the grace comes to the humble, and that grace is huge. Remember, I've talked about grace, grace, grace. We need that grace. We need that mercy. And that grace in this situation allows us to move, push past barriers, change policies, because we were graceful, we were humble, and we did it with confidence, not proudness. We're going to continue this because I have 5 things outlined in this, and it all starts with humility. Be safe. Go home. Make a difference.